Thanks, David, for that very, very generous introduction. I'm humbled. Thank you, everybody, for showing up today and attending this annual luncheon and supporting the Department of Communications, its faculty, its staff, and the students. It's nice to see a number of familiar faces here. It's nice to see the support that this institution and this department is getting from all of you, so thank you very much. You probably didn't realize you're getting an award-winning speaker today, and it's a family award. and my wife's here today, and every time I get up to speak and she attends, she has a grading system. So if I do okay, I get 4 bells. If I do okay or so-so, I get 2 bells, and you know the rest. The last speech that I gave, again, the award-winning speech was a Nobel Prize. We'll try to do better today. Like many of you in this room, I'm a huge fan of David Domke and all that he and his staff and his faculty do to continue to do for our great university and for our community. In addition to world-class research and teaching, they shape students' futures and prepare them to become capable leaders who will impact our community and our world. Priya is an example of one of those students, and congratulations to you, Priya. A great example of the department's thought leadership is the programs that you were introduced to today regarding diversity, debate, or leadership within communications that are vital to our thriving as a community, as businesses, as in institutions. The programs that the School of Communications, the Department of Communications offer address critical competencies to our organizations that are in desperate need of this talent. And as we scramble as leaders of organizations to strive for viable growth and igniting higher possibilities for us to achieve. David, to you and your team, thank you for all the inspiring work that you do, not only for the students, but to the alumni and friends of the university. You make it a priority to stay connected to us by including us in the applied learning approach that I know that you value. So David, thank you very much. In that spirit, I'd also like to thank David and Victoria Spring to talk and inviting me to speak to you today and give you my thoughts on communications and leadership. I'm humbled to be able to follow last year's speaker, Asunta Ung, who is a great role model for the community, and Asunta, a great role model for me. So thank you and welcome, and thank you for being here. So, God, the world is just a small circle of things, and it's amazing how fast time goes. I played baseball here at the University of Washington, and I still play in the alumni game every year. My rule of thumb is that if I don't hurt myself and I don't embarrass myself, I'm going to play the following year. So thankfully, I'm still playing. Well, last year when I got up to bat, the announcer speaks and says, now batting for the University of Washington alumni is Eddie Pasatiempo from the class of a long time ago. And then I heard from the other side of the dugout where the young alumni were, it says, whoa, that dude's old. They were right, because then I started calculating if I was a freshman and I was in that dugout and someone from the equivalent class were to be announced, that would have been somebody from the class of 1935. That's a year before Boys in the Boat. I said, that dude is old. But I remember, and it wasn't that too long ago, when I was sitting in the audience and there was a guest speaker from business, and I was a student in the School of Communications, and I saw that speaker and I said, someday I'd like to be that person. And I just can't believe that someday is today. It just goes by way too fast. And one of the things I've learned in this journey from yesterday to today is what really counts and what really matters are the relationships that you build. And I can't tell you, for those of you that I know that I've went to school with here, and for all of you that are here, just know that the relationship that you have with this university and this relationship that you have with the School of Communication is of high value, and I hope that you all appreciate it, and I think you all do because you're here today. So, leadership and communication. Bill Clinton gave a speech in Illinois a little while ago, and he said, running a country is like running a cemetery. You have a lot of people under you, but nobody's listening. Leadership surveys have identified some alarming trends in leadership capabilities that organizations encounter, but are not prepared to fully handle. If not addressed, many in your respective organizations may not be listening to you. Are they listening to you now? So why are people in our organizations not listening? How do we get them to listen? And what must we do to address the challenge? Well, let me fast forward to the punchline. And the punchline is in order for us to get people to listen in our institutions and our organizations, in order to get their attention, to drown out the noise that exists from the challenges and trends of businesses and what we face today, we have to step up as leaders, and we will depend on effective communications. We will depend on our ability to collaborate and get things done through others, and it's done through effective communications. You know, it's said in one of the, I was in a conversation with Lorraine Howell, who's a member of the Communications Hall of Fame. Lorraine, you here? I'm quoting you. and Lorraine in a conversation said, hey, communications is no longer a soft skill, it's a hard skill. So, I mean, I'll tell you, CIHS, communications is a hard skill. Write it down. Communication is a hard skill. I had the privilege a number of years ago to spend a week with Richard Pascal. Richard Pascal is a Stanford professor in the business school. He's the creator of the 7S structure, which is the fundamental framework that McKinsey Consulting uses as they assess businesses today. And it's been a long framework that's been tried and true, and I used it in my consulting days. But he divides these 7 S's in hard S's and soft S's. And the hard S's is strategy, structure, systems. And the soft S's was social style, style of management, skills you possess, and the skills of how you communicate. Well, I have to write Richard a letter to tell him that he's got to say that the hard S's, those 3 hard S's, there's a 4th one now, and that's CIS. Communications is a hard skill. So what I'd like to do today is talk about the challenges that we all face and the trends that we face as leaders, how communication is going to address that gap. And then I'd like to really kind of step back and talk about the ethos of leadership, that we should really consider some of these soft things that are really hard things that will make us impactful in leading our organizations, leading our peer groups and families, and leading business. So first of all, let's talk about the trends in leadership. Interestingly enough, in the baby boomer days, we had flat, hierarchical, siloed type of organization and structures. In the world that they lived in, it's basically keeping the wheels on and ensuring viable growth. Well, that model no longer exists. What happens today is we have flat, matrixed organizations that have to be siloed. And then we have horizontal organizations, because horizontal organizations are more flexible and agile to solve the complex problems that businesses are faced today. So what happens now then is that I've got to have a lot of different folks in order to solve common problems. So the trend of today is a flat organization. The other thing is that today complexity is the new normal. Executives say in a survey, they said that this year, or the challenges that are being faced today are 5 times as great as they served or they handled 5 years ago. As a matter of fact, there's a physicist, Milo, I think his name is, that says by the year 2025, that the complexity that's handled in 1 week will equal the complexity that the man handled in the 20th century. Wow, that's a tough pill to swallow. But you talk about a complex world. And in that complex world, I need to have flat, horizontal organizations. The other thing is that we have global expansion. We have remote workers. Now, this remote worker thing is kind of interesting. Working from home, telecommuting. Because what happens now is you create virtual leadership. And if executives, and what they said is face-to-face leadership and virtual leadership, where I'm managing people, where I don't get to see them that often, it's a different kind of leadership. And what happens now is I've got to employ, understand, and deploy technology and digital type solutions. So I've got to manage people leveraging these tools, and can you do it very effectively? The interesting thing is that same survey said that, wow, I need to have collaborative leadership, But the problem is that 85% of leaders believe that virtual leader skills are required in order to lead in this new millennium, and that 92% of the leaders feel that this skill is different than a face-to-face skill. The interesting thing too is that if we look at the talent that we have today, 29% of high performers are considered high potential. And the disappointing thing is 71% of those high performers are missing something to reach that next level of executive performance. 71% of high performers are missing something to achieve that next level of executive performance. And you know what the common identifier of what's missing? This is interesting. People skills, communication skills, and collaboration skills. I take a look at my organization, and we're growing at a 30% clip year over year. So it's a high growth. Just this year, we've hired 40 people in the first quarter. And I can tell you, to an individual that we hired, as bright as they are, as talented as they are, the missing skill that most of them have is the ability to collaborate and communicate effectively. The interesting thing is there is a talent gap, which is another trend. That talent gap is caused by a number of things. One of the things it's caused by is the baby boom. 83 million baby boomers in the workforce that are retiring. And they say that for every 3 executive positions, there's only 1 qualified person to fill that position. So what that means is that younger people are going to be placed in positions of higher responsibility without having the proper skills. The good news is, hey man, I can get in a pretty executive spot. The bad news is there's a high risk of derailment there. And what do they say? Interesting thing about this is that they say that people leadership skills are 3 to 4 times more important to a leader's success than the other skills or knowledge or competencies. 3 to 4 times more important. That's really kind of interesting. So here we have it, right? We have virtual leadership that's required. We have a situation where there's not enough talent. There's a talent shortage to handle these changes in the areas. And so how do we manage through this? What do we do? Because if you look at it, if this is our current level of performance, this is how we behave and perform in order to handle the challenges that we have today. And then I place on new challenges, higher challenges, stretch challenges, the BHAG, right? It's what happens is I've got to increase the desired level of performance of the people that I've got doing the work and handling the challenges. How do you do that? How do you handle that performance gap? We're responsible to do that, right? And so, there's about 5 different ways you handle the performance gap. And, the 5 ways, you can take a look at it. It could be 6 or 7, but the 5 ways is, 1, which is really important, is you got to make it safe for people to be successful. You got to take away the fear. When you have a big challenge and you give it to somebody, what happens is fear of failure. Oh, I may look bad to my peers, and so I won't be promoted as quickly. So as leaders, what you have to do in order to kind of close that gap, that performance gap, is take away the fear. So as a leader, you need to be able to communicate in an authentic way, relate in authentic ways. The other thing you have to do is you have to have vision to say, okay, there's progress. And that progress may be out of sight, but you've got to break it down in small pieces so that each step is a success step, and you're able to articulate, 1, the steps, and then 2, reward and recognize that performance. And coach along the way if they're not performing to a high level. So what happens is that the bigger and bolder the vision, the bigger the performance gap. And so the third thing we need to take a look at is focus on the progress of capabilities that are required to be successful. Then we have to take a look at opportunities versus risk, and you want to spend more time on opportunities than risk. You have to identify and mitigate risk, but spend time on opportunities. Look for opportunities, and that's when innovation happens. And then lastly, you have to break down silos, and we talked about that. But as we take a look at those kind of leadership kind of practices and how approaches and how you handle these trends of leaders, there are 4 C's that I think that are really important that you have to employ to make this happen. And the 4 C's is, 1, we have to be great coaches. We have to coach. We can't inspect what we expect. We can't, command and control. You have to coach. You have to coach for improvement, and you have to coach to support. The other thing is you have to connect. And this is one of the things that we have in today's transactional world. It's me, you, I've got something I need, you've got something that you can provide it, let's get this done, and I'm on to the next play. And I fail to recognize that, or I fail to nurture that connection because it's perishable, it's transactional. And I believe that you've got to invest in connections in order to be effective in a collaborative world. That's the next thing, is to be able to collaborate, is to be able to have shared wins, shared values, and shared rewards in attacking problems. And it can't just be what I need, but it's got to be a shared reward kind of system in order to effectively collaborate. Then lastly, you have to be able to communicate, and don't have to go into that here, but communication is really critical. And the communications is just not the verbal, the language that we use, nonverbal cues, etc., but it's also the technology and the digital methods in terms of how do we effectively communicate, which is a big chasm right now for a lot of companies. I can't tell you, and I bet you many of you can relate to this, is articulating a value proposition, whether you're a not-for-profit or a business, is a tough thing to get your arms around, as simple and basic as that is. And so that's really, really kind of a critical success factor there. All right, so let me talk about the Zen of leadership, and then I'm off. And that Zen of leadership, what I call, is action with awareness. Too many times we rely on our skills, and we don't realize we're exploiting those skills or even using those skills. I take a look at golf, and I'm a terrible golfer, but I love doing it. And basically what I do is I grip it and rip it, right? I just kind of, there's the ball. I want to hit it a long way. I want to hit it straight. Let's see what happens. But what happens is the Zen of something is action with awareness. And so action with awareness is if I were really a good golfer, I'd sit there and I'd say, okay, let me focus on my stance, thinking about it. Let me tell my grip, thinking about it. Okay, how far do I need to go, and where's the slope? You're thinking about it. This is awareness. Well, I'm not that good a golfer to kind of think all through those things, but let's take a look at that and apply that to leadership, the Zen of leadership. So there are 4 things that seem very common sense, but these are the things that I think we all need to embrace. The ethos of our individual capabilities and leadership that we need to employ in order to build successes in our leadership capabilities. And there are 4 things: self-awareness, authenticity and alignment, balance, and relationships. Self-awareness. Again, I don't want to go biblical on you, but there's a great metaphor. Was when God asked Moses, what's in your hand? You know the story? He says, what's in your hand? And he has his staff. And he says, what's in your hand? And he says, throw your staff on the ground. The staff goes on the ground and turns into what? A snake, right? And then he commands us, he picks up the snake and it turns back into a staff. So the metaphor that I'd like to introduce you is this staff was Moses' identity. This staff was Moses' way of making an income in terms of guiding. He was a shepherd, right? So guiding the sheep and directing the sheep. And this staff was also represented his influence, the influence that he had amongst his flock. So then I challenge all of you to think about, what's in your hand, right? So the first thing is that, what is your identity? Income is just not dollars in the bank, but income is psychic income. Income is what you give and what you get. And the influence, what kind of influence do you have on people? What kind of effect do you have on people? What kind of influence do you want to have on people? So when I take a look at self-awareness, good leaders today, in order to coach, in order to collaborate, in order to connect, in order to communicate, are very self-aware. I'll tell you a great story is when I was in Indonesia, I was the IBM president of IBM Indonesia, and I met with Price Waterhouse, the managing director there. Now I know Cass is is in the advertising business. But the managing director and I met, and then after he left, I got together with the VP of marketing, and I said, how did the meeting go? What do you think? And he said, you want to know what he thought of you? And I said, sure, yeah. He said, he thought you were arrogant, he thought you were really stuck up, and I said, wow, why do you think that? My self-awareness that was the farthest thing that I did have, right? He says, well, you only spoke English, and he thought you were trying to show off how well you spoke English. But, I wasn't self-aware of what I looked like because, I'm sitting here in Indonesia, and I should have been more self-aware in that regard. The other thing is being a collegiate athlete, I'm not the biggest guy in stature. And, I played sports, football, basketball, baseball, and I played baseball, as I mentioned, here at the University of Washington, but I never knew I was short. And that was good news and bad news. The good news of not being short is that I didn't get intimidated by anything, but the bad news on that is that sometimes I came across as arrogant, pompous, etc., and overconfident. Again, self-awareness. These are kind of extreme examples, but just wanted to make a small point, is be self-aware. Know your identity. Know where you get your source of motivation and pride through the income that you receive, and then understand how you influence and how you can influence those around you and those you lead. The next thing is authenticity and alignment. Take a look at that, and I don't want to dwell on authenticity, but it's just not your personality testing in terms of being authenticity and authentic, or it's not just looking somebody in the eye and say, hey, I like you, or you're my bud, or you're my bro. Authenticity is being consistent day in and day out, so when people see you, they see the same person, no matter what your mood, no matter what your demeanor, no matter what the condition, is being authentic. It's really important that people see a consistent you in their dealings with you day in and day out, and that you're aligned with other people's points of view. You don't have to agree with it, but you acknowledge it and you align to it so that you know how to communicate in an authentic way to have an encounter. Next is balance. And balance, there's a great comment, and this was from Richard Pascal again. He said, the seed of everything lies in its opposite. So if you're too much of one thing, it turns into the other. So for example, if you're so beautiful that you're vain, you're ugly, right? And so the seed of everything, you got to have balance. And so this is an example from a business perspective. I'll take a look at Nordstrom's and Macy's. This was a number of years back. But Macy's was really focused on being competitive, and so they invested in IT systems and technology. So what happens is they can inventory control, cost control, bottom line. But what happened is the shopper's experience when they went in there, what they would do is that if I bought something in the dress department and I bought a purse, I had to pay for the purse in the purse department. So my customer experience went south. So what happened was they had all these efficiencies, but the customers didn't go there because it was a hassle to shop there. Then you take a look at, so that's one extreme. Then let's take it to the other extreme, because Macy's fell down and they had to reinvent themselves. You take it to the other extreme, and it's Nordstrom's. And for those of you a number of years ago, especially, well, they still have it, but they're known for service. But it was so extreme that they didn't even care about systems, that what happens is they grew and they scale. That service model they have without control was their demise until they had to reinvent themselves. Again, too much of one thing. As we look at individuals, are we too much of one thing? Do we behave too much in one way? And all I am suggesting to you when you think about this ethos, this Zen, is just having balance. I know in my career I thought, hey, Eddie's too nice a guy. He's always smiling. And so I said, okay, in order to get up the ladder or climb that ladder, I got to be a hard butt. And so I said, all right, I'm going to be tough. I'm going to be this tough guy. So when people came in meetings, I'm just going to be all over them. And so I overdid it. It wasn't me. I wasn't authentic. And so it was a lesson learned. It was too much going the wrong way. It wasn't applying my values or being authentic in that regard. So the seed of everything lies in its opposite. And then lastly is relationships. And this is an area that I hold very dearly. And it's an asset and an attribute that I don't think a lot of people focus on or appreciate as much. I give a whole couple days seminar on relationships. And so let me try to capsulize a mouthful of words and a spoonful of thought. And that is this. First of all, relationships, I believe, is people talk about networks and building a network. And I would surmise that most people overestimate the value of their relationships or even overestimates their relationships. If it's not one meeting, it's several, that I'll go in, and let's say it's a not-for-profit, and we're trying to look for sponsors. And we say, okay, who knows this company or who knows that company? And it's amazing to me, everybody says, well, I know that person, I know this person, I know that person. And what happens is that what's the level of your relationship with the person you know? And I'll tell you, 7 times out of 10, it's not very strong. It's not very strong. We tend to overestimate our relationships. And so what happens is that, there's this thing I call network. And if you look at your network, how many in your network can you truly access that will return your phone call, that will return your email, that will gladly get back to you and listen to whatever ask that you had? And I would challenge you that number is not very strong. And I believe it's because we just tend to overestimate relationships and we underinvest in those relationships. We underinvest in those relationships. My rule of thumb is it seems to me that we overinvest in the wrong relationships and underinvest on the right relationships. So that's one piece, is make an investment in a relationship. The other thing is that I don't think relationships are two-way. I think they're three-way or more. I believe in triadic relationships. And triadic relationships, in order to move the ball forward and in order to establish credibility, that triadic relationship is me meeting David at a party, but introducing him to cast cells. And the three of us understanding and connecting in a way that helps the greater good. At the same time, helping ourselves. Triadic relationships helps build a bigger network. Triadic relationships helps build a better and stronger community. So there you have it. The Zen of leadership. Self-awareness, authenticity and alignment, balance and relationships in order to connect our world to be more effective leaders. And I believe, and just let me kind of close with this. CIHS. Lorraine, are you proud of me? CIHS. Communications is a hard skill. And again, I just want to say thank you to David for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for all that you do for the students and this university, and most importantly, our community. And thank you all for participating and supporting the department.